state had always been an exercise in coded criticism and veiled disappointment. This year was no different, except that my carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. "Elizabeth, darling," Aunt Patricia's voice dripped with false concern as she adjusted her designer suit. "Still working as some sort of secretary, is it?" I sipped my tea, thinking of the classified documents in my briefcase and the security detail stationed discreetly around the estate's perimeter. "Administrative work. Yes. Such a waste," Cousin Margaret chimed in, flashing her engagement ring from a minor aristocrat. "With your Oxford degree you could have done something meaningful. If they only knew that my meaningless job involved advising the Queen on matters of state and international diplomacy." "At least she's employed," Uncle George offered, checking his Rolex. "Though I do wish you'd accept my offer to join the family business. Even a junior position would be better than whatever it is you do all day." I checked my secure phone under the table. 3 messages from the palace about the upcoming Commonwealth Summit. 2 from the Prime Minister's office. "What do you actually do?" Aunt Patricia pressed, ever the family inquisitor. "Type letters? File papers? Make coffee?" "Something like that," I murmured, noting the approaching black vehicles through the window. "Right on schedule." Grandmother adjusted her prized tiara, a family heirloom she wore at every gathering to remind us of our tenuous connection to nobility. "I just want to understand, dear. You had such promise." The estate's security system pinged quietly, royal guards passing through the outer perimeter. My detail had integrated seamlessly with the family's regular security, who had no idea who they were really protecting. "Well," I began, but Cousin Margaret interrupted. "Did you see the news? The Queen's chief advisor negotiated that brilliant trade deal with Japan. That's the kind of career you could have had, Lizzie." I bit back a smile, remembering the late nights crafting that very agreement. "Yes, I did see that. What do you even do all day?" Aunt Patricia scoffed, reaching for more tea. The double doors opened. The royal guard, resplendent in full ceremonial uniform, entered with practiced precision. "Your Majesty's chief advisor," the lead guard announced formally. "Your car awaits. The Queen requires your presence for the emergency council meeting." Grandmother's tiara slipped precariously as her hand flew to her throat. "Thank you, Captain," I said calmly, standing and smoothing my simple skirt, actually a bespoke design worn for meeting foreign dignitaries. "Please inform Her Majesty I'll be there shortly." The room had frozen. Aunt Patricia's teacup hung suspended halfway to her lips. Uncle George's Rolex suddenly seemed very cheap compared to the royal seal on my briefcase. "You," Cousin Margaret whispered, "you're the Queen's chief advisor?" "Yes." I picked up my briefcase. "Those meaningless papers I file? State secrets? That coffee I make? Usually served during meetings with world leaders." The guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, the Prime Minister is waiting." "Of course." I turned to my stunned family. "I'd love to stay and discuss my wasted potential, but I have a Commonwealth to help run." The guard placed my official coat over my shoulders, a garment worth more than Aunt Patricia's entire wardrobe, though without the obvious designer labels she favored. "But," Uncle George sputtered, "you said you were a secretary." "I said I did administrative work," I corrected. "Administrating national policy, international relations and royal affairs certainly qualifies." I smiled slightly. "Though I suppose that's not as impressive as the family real estate business." More guards entered, each bearing the royal insignia. Through the window I could see my security detail emerging from their covers as gardeners and house staff. The estate's grounds now revealed what they truly were: a carefully orchestrated security operation protecting one of the nation's highest-ranking officials. "The woman on TV last week," Grandmother whispered, her tiara now completely askew, standing next to the Queen at Parliament. "Was me, yes." I checked my secure phone again. "The same disappointment you've been lamenting at every family gathering." Cousin Margaret's aristocratic fiancé would be at the council meeting. I made a mental note to remind him who actually wielded the power in this family. "Those late nights at the office," Aunt Patricia's voice shook, "when you couldn't attend family functions, were usually spent negotiating international treaties or advising on matters of state." I opened my briefcase, revealing documents bearing the royal seal. "The boring meetings you mocked? Generally involved heads of state." The captain of the guard stepped forward again. Ma'am, your secure line is active. The Japanese Prime Minister wishes to discuss the trade agreement. The one you praised earlier, Margaret? I raised an eyebrow at my cousin. Funny how someone like me could have negotiated that. Uncle George was frantically Googling on his phone, no doubt finding years of carefully cropped photos showing me in the background of major world events. Always present, always powerful, always overlooked by those who should have known better. Your office, he choked out. It's not some corporate cubicle. No, I confirmed. It's in Buckingham Palace. The small desk, I mentioned? A priceless antique used by every chief advisor since Victoria's reign. My security detail had fully emerged now, transforming the family gathering into what it truly was, a high-level security operation protecting a crucial government official. The Christmas party you missed last year, grandmother said faintly, when you said you had to work, was the royal Christmas ball. I was seated next to the Queen. I checked my watch, a subtle piece that cost more than their houses combined. The casual dinner, I left early last month? Emergency meeting with the UN Security Council. The guards formed their standard formation around me. Through the windows, more official vehicles had arrived, their presence finally revealing the true nature of their simple family member. Now, I gathered my belongings. If you'll excuse me, there's a rather important matter of state requiring my attention. Though I'm sure it's nothing compared to Margaret's wedding planning. As I moved toward the door, Aunt Patricia found her voice. Why didn't you tell us? I turned back one final time. Would you have believed that the niece you dismissed as just a secretary was actually one of the most powerful people in the Commonwealth? That the cousin you pitied was advising the Queen? That the daughter you thought had settled for less had actually achieved more than you could imagine? The guards opened the doors, revealing the full extent of the security operation, and with it the true scope of my position. Besides, I added, watching you praise my work on TV while dismissing me in person was rather illuminating. Amazing what people reveal when they think they're talking to someone unimportant. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in what you show, but in what you let others fail to see. And sometimes the most influential person in the room is the one everyone underestimated. As I walked out, I heard grandmother's tiara finally clatter to the floor, much like their illusions about their ordinary relative. The next family gathering would certainly be interesting, now that they knew who really belonged at the head of the table. 1 month later, I sat in my actual office. Not the secretary's desk my family had imagined, but a vast chamber in Buckingham Palace adorned with centuries of royal history. The antique desk before me had served every chief advisor since 1837, its surface now covered with state papers and diplomatic briefs. Your morning schedule, ma'am, my assistant entered, carrying a leather portfolio bearing the royal crest. The Prime Minister requests a meeting about the Commonwealth Summit. And your family has been persistent in their attempts to reach you. I smiled, thinking of the dozens of increasingly desperate messages from relatives who'd spent years dismissing me. I imagine Aunt Patricia is particularly eager to discuss my meaningless paperwork now. The screens lining my office walls displayed global news feeds, diplomatic cables, and security briefings. Each one a testament to the power I wielded while my family thought I was making coffee and filing papers. The Japanese trade delegation arrives at noon, my assistant continued. And Cousin Margaret's fiancé requested a private audience. How interesting, I mused, remembering his condescending comments about my little office job. Schedule him for next week. In the public receiving room. A gentle knock announced the Queen's private secretary. Ma'am, Her Majesty requests your presence. The matter of succession requires your counsel. I stood, smoothing my bespoke suit, the same one Aunt Patricia had criticized as off the rack at our last meeting. Of course. Though first, I glanced at the security feeds. I believe my family has arrived for their scheduled tour. The palace gates showed a group of very nervous relatives being escorted through security. Time to let them see exactly what their simple secretary actually did. Show them to the diplomatic reception room, I instructed. The one with the full view of my actual office. Sometimes the best revelation isn't told. It's shown, preferably from behind bulletproof glass and centuries of royal authority. The security feeds showed my family being led through the palace, their expressions shifting from awe to shock as they began to understand the true scope of my position. Aunt Patricia clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Uncle George's Rolex seemed particularly inadequate amid the royal splendor. "Your Majesty's chief advisor," a guard announced as I entered the reception room. My family turned, finally seeing me in my true element. "Welcome to my little office," I said quietly, watching their faces as they took in the grandeur surrounding us. "Though I suppose it's a bit larger than the cubicle you imagined." Grandmother clutched her ever-present tiara, looking particularly costume-like amid the authentic royal treasures. "Elizabeth, this is where I actually work." "Yes." I gestured to the historic paintings and priceless artifacts. "That filing cabinet," I mentioned. "Actually the royal archives. The break room. The Queen's private dining room." The screens behind me lit up with diplomatic feeds and security briefings. A direct line to the Prime Minister blinked urgently. "Excuse me," I said, pressing the intercom. "Yes, Prime Minister? The trade agreement is ready for your review." My family watched in stunned silence as I casually discussed international policy with the head of government. "Now," I turned back to them, "shall we discuss what I really do all day?" The tour was about to reveal more than they'd ever imagined about their underachieving relative. 6 months after the family's discovery of my true position, I stood before the United Nations General Assembly, delivering a keynote address on international cooperation. In the diplomatic section, my family sat watching, their presence a carefully orchestrated lesson in humility. "The future of global diplomacy," I concluded, "requires us to look beyond appearances, beyond assumptions, to recognize power and capability in all its forms." The standing ovation echoed through the chamber. Through the bulletproof glass, I could see Aunt Patricia wiping away tears, finally understanding the magnitude of her misjudgment. Back in my UN office, one of many I maintained globally, I prepared for the final phase of their education and consequences. "Your afternoon appointments, ma'am," my diplomatic aide announced. "The Security Council briefing, followed by the Royal Succession Planning meeting. And your family's security clearance for the evening reception has been processed." I smiled, remembering their previous dismissals of my boring dinner plans. "Excellent. And the seating arrangements?" "As requested. Cousin Margaret's fiancé has been placed next to the Duke, who outranks him by several degrees." The screens showed global reactions to my speech. World leaders quoted my words, financial markets responded to my suggestions, and international policies shifted based on my recommendations. "The Queen's private jet is ready," another aide reported. "And the Prime Minister has approved your proposal for the Commonwealth restructuring." I gathered my materials, each document bearing seals and signatures that represented more power than my family's combined influence could ever match. "Your Majesty's chief advisor," the head of security announced. "The diplomatic corps awaits." I stepped into the grand reception hall, where world leaders mingled with royalty. My family stood awkwardly in their finest attire, finally witnessing the true scope of their simple relative's influence. "Elizabeth," grandmother approached, her precious tiara looking particularly modest among the authentic royal jewels. "We never knew." "That's rather the point," I replied, accepting a brief from a passing diplomat. "You never thought to ask what I really did. Never looked beyond your assumptions." Aunt Patricia hovered nearby, watching heads of state greet me with obvious respect. "All those times we criticized your career." I was usually between meetings with prime ministers or drafting international treaties. I signed a document that would reshape global trade. The basic office work, you pitted, generally involved matters of national security. Uncle George stared as his business idol, a prominent Sioux, who waited patiently for my attention. "The family business offer I made you would have been a significant step down," I finished. "Though I appreciate the irony of you offering a better position to someone who helps govern the Commonwealth." The Queen's private secretary appeared. "Ma'am, Her Majesty requests your presence for the final succession discussions." My family watched in awe as I was escorted to a private meeting that would help shape the future of the monarchy. "The simple truth," I addressed them before leaving, "is that real power doesn't need to announce itself. True influence doesn't require constant validation. And sometimes the most important person in the room is the one you never bothered to really see." The reception continued, a glittering display of global power and influence. My family stood witness to what their underachieving relative had actually achieved, while they were too busy judging to notice. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in proving people wrong. It's in letting them finally see just how right you've been all along. And sometimes the most powerful lesson comes not from what you say, but from what you allow others to finally understand on their own. Your Majesty awaits, the guard announced. I left my family to absorb the full magnitude of their misjudgment, surrounded by the power they'd failed to see, in a world they never knew I helped govern. The next family gathering would certainly be different, though I'd probably be too busy advising on matters of state to attend. After all, some responsibilities outweigh family obligations, even if it took them years to understand exactly what those responsibilities entailed. The world turned based partly on my counsel, nations shifted based on my advice, and power moved according to my recommendations, all while they thought I was making coffee and filing papers. Sometimes the best success isn't in proving your worth to others, but in quietly building an influence so vast that when they finally see it, their previous judgments become their greatest embarrassment. As I entered the Queen's private chamber, ready to help shape the future of the monarchy, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of my family finally understanding exactly who they'd been underestimating all these years. The simple secretary they'd dismissed had turned out to be one of the most influential advisors in modern history. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in the revelation. It's in watching others realize just how wrong they've been all along. And sometimes the most powerful person in the family isn't the one with the flashiest title or the loudest voice. It's the one quietly shaping the world while others are too busy judging to notice. The guard closed the doors behind me, leaving my family to contemplate their years of misjudgment in the company of world leaders who knew exactly who I was, and always had. Power, after all, doesn't need to announce itself. It simply needs to be revealed at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right audience with exactly the right impact. And in this case, that impact would last far longer than any family gathering ever could. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't in the revelation. It's in the lasting understanding that follows, in the quiet acknowledgement of power that was always there, just waiting to be recognized by those too blind to see it. The future of the Commonwealth awaited my counsel, while my family finally